Today we're going to be learning all about boundary games. Having a solid foundation in having value in a boundary for a dog is really important for a number of reasons. First, it anchors your dog in place in your house. And you can see how this might be particularly valuable to you as an owner and important for maintaining a calm, happy household. If your dog has value in being anchored specifically in one spot, that either prevents or eliminates unwanted behaviors like counter surfing or jumping up on people when they come into the house or getting into things that they really shouldn't be into. Instead, your dog has value in calmly and happily remaining in one spot in the house. Additionally, developing value and a boundary can be really helpful for sport dogs, like in agility, for instance. It's kind of a foundation to a good start line stay before you start your course. For our family, we travel frequently with Tess, and I know that because of the value that she has in a boundary, and it doesn't have to be this boundary, that when we go to a new location, when we go to a backcountry cabin or a VRBO, that I can set out a boundary and she will happily know that it is her job to be on that boundary, and she can very comfortably and confidently take herself there. So, how do we get started with building value in a boundary? Well, your boundary can really be anything. Typically, I would start with a bed because a dog recognizes that as a place to rest potentially. I've used boundaries that have been in the form of a rock or a jacket. It really is a creative thing, and as your dog builds value in very obvious boundaries, you'll notice that they'll start to create boundaries out of less obvious things like shadows or rocks. So to get started, what you need is a good marker word so that you tell your dog immediately that they've done the right thing by going to the boundary, and very importantly, a good release word. You don't necessarily want to command your dog to stay on the boundary. They should just build value in being there inherently. They should also have value in a release word, the thing that tells them it's okay to hop off. So for me, I have my marker word and my release word, and I'm gonna get started with topping up our value in the boundary. So, Tessie, break. So you release her off the boundary, and now to start, what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna throw a piece of food toward the boundary. Yes, nice job. Toss a little piece of food away to release any pressure on her that she might be feeling. And now, since she's feeling it, you can tell she's pretty well practiced. She knows that that's where the value is. So I'm gonna release her, break. And now, I'm gonna throw a piece of food on the boundary. Oops. Yes. Yes. Now, I expect, because she has a lot of value built in this boundary, that she'll stay there until I release her. And the way that I built value in the boundary is that we did lots of releases, break, and lots of sending her back to it. Yes, nice job. We also do a lot of feeding the boundary. So essentially, and quite literally, putting food, part of her daily food allowance, on the boundary so that she understands that this is where the value is. It's not out there, it's right here on her bed. Now, if your dog doesn't value stillness a lot, and Tess is like that too, it's okay to, at the beginning, build in a lot of releases off of the boundary. Break. That's a nice pressure release for her from having to be still on the boundary. And then you toss a piece of food on. Yes. And then you can go back to feeding the boundary. And it's important to remember that when you're feeding the boundary, if you're practicing releasing them off and feeding them to the boundary, always feed more pieces of food to the boundary than you would out there, because that's telling them that you want the value, you're assigning the value to the bed. There's more value, there's more food on the bed than off the bed. Break. Nice. Nice job. Now, as you build value in your boundaries, what you may see in your dog, and what I've certainly seen with Tess, is more calmness in the house. She chooses to go to her boundary more often than she chooses to be off of it. And you can place boundaries all over the house. So essentially, she's just moving from boundary to boundary across the house, and she always has the ability to make a good choice inside the house. The other thing that you'll likely notice is that when you're out and about in the world, say you're walking with your dog and you have to stop and tie your shoe or answer a phone call or talk to somebody, they're more likely than not going to recognize that time as a time where they can put themselves on a makeshift boundary. I've noticed with Tess that when we're out hiking, whenever we stop for water or for food, that she is now actively putting herself on boundaries like rocks or under trees and waiting for us until we're ready to go. And that's all because we have grown lots of value in calmness and in remaining stationary in a certain place until given the opportunity to keep going. So, have fun with boundary games. There are lots of different ways that you can increase the difficulty and duration as your dog gets skilled. But don't be frustrated if they don't recognize right away that this is a good place to be and they want to pop off. Keep putting the value on the bed. You can practice this 3 to 5 minutes a day, multiple times a day, and really solidify the value that your dog has in staying nicely on a boundary.